The Penguins blew yet another 2-goal lead against the New York Islanders on Tuesday night, and Pat and I are going to break down that loss for you all right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at @SinandForWet, and you can follow the show's account on Twitter at @LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And yes, everyone, I still very much have a raspy voice, and I'm hoping that this is going to get better in the next couple of days. So, Pat, to start off today's show, are you familiar with the song Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who? I'm sure you are. I'm sure everyone that listens to this show knows that song. If you don't, you're probably living under a rock, to be honest. But
hey, you may give me grief for being a Swiftie or enjoying whatever music I enjoy, but that's one place where our music tastes converge. Who, one of my favorite bands.
Seen them 3 times, and there's a lyric in that song that very much applies to this game and a lot of games in these last 3 seasons. So meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And that's exactly what we have here with the Penguins blowing yet another 2-goal lead this season. This continues to be a massive problem for this team for a 3rd season in a row at this point. And it's unacceptable. It's pathetic. I was really ready to come on here for today's episode and sing a lot of praises. I felt like those first 45 to 50 minutes were some of the best consistent hockey I've seen this team play this season. They were defending really well in their own zone. They weren't making careless decisions, with the puck. They were getting good offensive zone time. They were getting pucks past Ilya Sorokin. And then that all evaporated in the final 10 minutes, starting with that really foolish penalty by Drew O'Connor. I thought O'Connor played a really strong game up until that point, but you can't give the referees any reason to call a penalty on you in that situation, especially after Michael Bunting just got a big goal. You're up 3-1. You have half a period left. All you got to do is play mistake-free hockey, and you're going to walk out of there with 2 points. The Islanders weren't doing anything in the offensive zone. They were just flat out awful with chances. Again, and that's been the theme for them throughout the season. They haven't been able to finish chances. They're one of the worst finishing teams in the league. But then you give them that power play, they make it 3-2, and then a few minutes later, this team wilts once again. Game is tied 3-3. They go into overtime. They have a chance to win there in the power play, aren't able to do it, and then they lose in a shootout. And I'm not going to overreact to a shootout loss just because shootouts are so random. I could go on for days about how Chris Letang doesn't want to change up his shootout move or why Sid doesn't want to deke. It's whatever. They're going to keep doing the same thing just because I think at this point, people, they hate shootouts. But the fact of the matter is, Pat, blowing leads like this, it's inexcusable. It needs to stop.
Yeah, it's like you said, for 50-ish minutes last night, they were head and shoulders the better team. The Islanders had a couple chances here and there, but that's what you expect out of an NHL game. Your opponent eventually is going to get a look or two, but they really played some very efficient hockey against the Islanders through 2 periods. And even when they cut the score, or when they tied it up in the second period, the Penguins didn't falter. They just kept going about their business. Evgeny Malkin gets a great goal on the power play. And then about 8 minutes into the third, Michael Bunting gets a massive goal for him because he's really needed that to get on the score sheet. We'll see if that turns into anything. But then it's the same thing that we have seen throughout the rest of the rest of the year, is that they gave up a huge goal to Holmstrom after that penalty. And to your point about DOC, he can't take that penalty. I know that him and Dobson have been battling all night, and that was great theater to watch. They were jostling all night, and I thought that was, up to that point, Drew O'Connor's best game of the season. but he takes that penalty. The Islanders make them pay, and just a few minutes later, they tie the game. And it's what we have seen from them. When the times get tough, they just seem to wilt. And listen, I know you're going to touch on this, and I know a lot of people have touched on this. I, again, don't want this to come off as me saying, don't blame Mike Sullivan. He has to wear this. But at the same time, they are not peewee hockey players. They have been doing this for the better part of their lives. And many of them have won Stanley Cup championships or gone deep in the playoffs. This is inexcusable from a player standpoint. They have to know that when you give up a goal, and they did it early, they gave up a goal, they went right back to work, took the lead back. And last night, times get tough, and they all started puck chasing. They fell apart in the defensive zone. They went away from everything that was working for them and just completely abandoned it. And look what happened.
No, you're right. I mean, they were just, again, running around on the ice like headless chickens after the Islanders made it 3-2. And then same thing after it was tied. I mean, they tried to get a couple more chances late in the third period, but it was hard because the Islanders got a power play to end the third period. And if they had scored there, I mean, the Penguins would have walked out of this game with no points instead of one, when, I mean, they probably should have walked out with two if they knew how to defend a lead. But you look at the way they've been defending leads for the better part of these last 3 seasons, but just looking at this season, they've held a 2-goal lead in 5 of their last 8 games. They've lost 4 of those games. That's pathetic. It's on the players and it's on the coaches. I remember a time.
Yeah, like I said, just to add real quick, because I know we'll get the comments. I'm not absolving Mike Sullivan of this loss. I'm just saying that there has to be at some point a discussion of the players wearing this, because coaches can only do so much. And maybe this means the message is stale. I think it probably is, but they are not children. They are not little kids learning the game anymore. This is something that they should know how to do. And the fact that they have been doing this is just inexcusable.
No, I agree, but I do think the message has probably gone stale, because I remember a time when the Penguins, they were automatic in the third period with a 1 or 2 goal lead when Mike Sullivan first came to town as Penguins head coach. I mean, 2016, 2017, heck, even 2018, 2019, this team was very good at defending leads in the third period. But these last 2 to 3 seasons, it has gone completely out the window. According to JFresh Hockey, you want to look at another stat here. 5 2-goal leads in 14 games this season after squandering 12 of those last season, 11 the season prior. We're only 14 games in. They've already blown 5 2-goal leads this season. It's A, the message is going stale. Mike Sullivan is clearly not getting through to these players, I think. And B, the players just don't know what they're doing when they go up to. They think, oh, we can just coast to victory. We can kind of just do whatever we want in the defensive zone. No, you still need to keep playing. When you have a team pinned down like that on the mat, you don't want to give them a chance to breathe again. And that's exactly what the Penguins did against an Islanders team that can't score for crap. I mean, they were without Adam Pelech, Anthony Duclair, Matt Barzal, Romanov was not playing. You cannot allow a team like that, which is already struggling to score as it is, to score 2 goals in the final 10 minutes. It's not good enough.
It's not. And I know that this is going to be contradictory to what we have said about this team and the way we've analyzed this team, with them essentially being a team that's not looking to contend right now. But there does have to be a little bit of an onus on Kyle Dubas that outside of your big names who are doing their jobs for the most part, I would say Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, definitely Erik Karlsson in spurts, Chris Letang in spurts.
I would say Chris Letang, not really to start this season. And I hate saying that, Pat, because he's been my dude for a very long time. I have defended him from a lot of very weird fans bashing him for no reason, but he has been bad this year, and it sucks seeing his game rot away.
I'm with you on that, but the point I'm making is this. And a lot of it, an onus falls on Kyle Dubas, because even though this is not a team that has Stanley Cup dreams, and I get that, that's not how this team was built, they don't have, outside of the big guns, any killers. And they sort of did at the end of last year when we had that Michael Bunting bump. But up until last night, he's been invisible. They don't really have anybody right now, at least nobody has stepped up to this point, to shake this team out of its slumber. Because if you remember, especially in those cup winning years or a few years that followed, they had guys who would shake this team out of a slumber, or when they would go up on a team, they would keep the pedal to the metal. You look at this team this year, and they just take a break when they go up. They just think, okay, like you said, it's in the bag. We're good. It's over. Game over. Let's take our 2 points and leave. And then they blow it.
Well, it was the same thing last year too. So many blown third period leads where they would just be like, oh, okay, we're just going to take the rest of this period off. They're not going to come back. It's like, no, teams will play until the final whistle. You saw that last night with the Islanders. You've seen that countless times. This loss really reminded me of that Flames loss last year where the Penguins, they took that 2-goal lead with about half a period to go, and then they just kind of sleptwalked, and then they lost that game in regulation, even though they were playing really well for those 50 minutes. Again, I was ready to come on here and really praise this team for this win with the way they were playing through 50 minutes. I felt like in terms of an overall first 50 minutes, that was the best 50 minutes they've played as a team all year. And then they just wilt when the pressure comes back. So this has got to change. I just don't think it's going to, though.
Well, I guess we're going to have to talk about that in the second segment, because at this point, you still have a quarter of a season to, or 3/4 of a season to play. And I don't see that, and we'll get into it, but I don't see this lasting this way all season, because I just can't tell myself that this team is truly this bad.
I mean, I hope not. I mean, at some point, though, they need to learn how to defend a third period lead, especially when you're up 2 and you have a team pinned down to the mat. But I think that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to discuss more of what this loss can mean for the rest of the season and some positive performances to take away from this game. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action, and with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. It's also the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. It's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks also keeps your lineup alive. You can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play only $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big touts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to write even more value to your lineups. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, I'll kind of just leave with this question here. Is this going to be able to be fixed during the season? Because right now, I see no evidence of it. We saw the same issues with defending a third period lead last year. They've carried over into this year. You saw it the season before that. I really think it's just kind of systematic at this point. I think it's player-wise, no one knows what they're doing when they're defending a lead. And you said it. It's on the players. It's on the coaches. But I just really don't see a way that this changes right now.
See, I'm thinking about it this way, right? And we talked about this, I think, last week with Jesse about just coaches in general, about how it's not just a Mike Sullivan thing. Coaches across all sports are for the most part, extremely resistant to change, especially big change. They may make tweaks here and there, but for the most part, the meat and potatoes of their systems are going to stay the same. But at this point, that has to be the next button to push for Mike Sullivan. Is you have seen this team can't defend, at least not in the way you're asking them to defend. There has to be some sort of change in the defensive zone. And I have been harping on this all season long. They have switched up their offensive attack, and it showed last night. What they did last night was they possessed the puck down low and tried to work it to the middle as best they could. And it, for 50 minutes, showed some success. And if he isn't willing to make a change to that defensive zone coverage, this is just going to continue, because if you continue to watch it, there have been infrequent moments this season where they get it right. And you saw it for a long period last night. You saw it during that little 2-game win streak that they had. They were running it correctly. They were rotating when they had to rotate. People were getting to their spots. They were covering the right players, but they, for some reason, cannot play it for a full 60 minutes, which tells me they are incapable of playing it. So at some point, you have to make this change, because it's not going to matter if Yoel Blomqvist stays up and turns into an all-star, or if Tristan Jarry comes back next week and is magically fixed, or if Alex Nedeljkovic just takes the reins. They are going to be absolutely on an island, because the defense in front of them is going to leave them out to dry. So their struggles won't really matter, because the team's defense struggles supersede it. So I am of the mindset that I think Sullivan's going to last the season, just because this isn't a contending team. The big guns like him, and we can kind of tell what Kyle Dubas's mentality is, especially overall, if you guys look like you have a chance, I'm going to help you. If you don't, I'm going to continue this rebuild, retool on the fly. And if this team finds itself in a similar position or worse at the end of this season, he might pull the trigger and say, okay, I've done everything else with the roster. It's time for the coach to go.
Right. And I do think, at least so far, I don't think Kyle Dubas has seen anything to make him be like, yeah, you deserve any help, because they don't right now.
No.
I think he's kind of being proved right that, oh yeah, I'm glad I kind of started this retool / rebuild on the fly, and I'm going to try to get more assets at the trade deadline. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he started doing it a bit earlier than he did last year, considering that last year, remember, he was kind of all in on one more playoff berth for this team. But this year, he's kind of the mentality like, okay, if they make the playoffs, that's good. No one's believing in us. But we know deep down that this is not a playoff team heading into this year. And there was something from 32 Thoughts last week that I was listening to, and Elliot Bremen was discussing how Penguin players were kind of upset at the Penguins management last year for some of the moves they made. But he even said, Kyle Dubas has been proven right with that, because the players haven't showed him that he was wrong. And the same thing is being showed this year, at least to start the year, about a month into the season as well. One more negative thing I want to get into before we touch on some positive performances from this game, and that is the power play in overtime. I felt like in regulation, the power play was more crisp. I felt like, especially on the power play goal that Evgeny Malkin had, the movement was really nice. I love seeing a good old-fashioned Geno bomb from the circle. But in overtime, you saw last year's power play really creep into this year's power play. You have a full 2 minutes, 4-on-3. You have all that world-class talent out there. The Islanders' penalty kill is not very good, but you're kind of just playing patty cake, passing the puck back and forth. They only had one quality chance, and it was a Malkin pass to Crosby for a deflection. That really nice save by Sorokin, by the way, but that's your only chance with 2 minutes of a 4-on-3. Come on, man. You got to be. When you have a chance to win that game, you need that killer instinct, and they have not had it these last couple of seasons.
Yeah, the thing that struck me about the overtime power play was they got halfway there. They did the right thing in the sense that they backed up the Islanders' power or penalty kill to get themselves looks. They just never took that next step, except for the one deflection, where once you back them up, you've opened up more ice for your shooters, and they just never got them to them, or at the very least didn't get them into a position to where they could shoot. So the improvements we have seen on this team early on in 3-on-3 overtime now has to become an improvement on 4-on-3 power plays in overtime, should they get them, because that really should at this point be automatic, but it just isn't. Because like you said, that killer instinct wasn't there. They did half of the right things, but didn't finish the job. And I will say this, outside of Holmstrom's goal, which was a little bit weird, the PK was good last night. They did the things they needed to do, especially in 3-on-3 when they were down 4-on-3. And a huge shout out to Noel Acciari, who has been just fantastic on the PK the last few games. And he's continued his solid play over the past few games.
that was just a better move by Holmstrom. There's really not much anyone could do there. The penalty killers are doing their job. Delkovich was doing his job, excuse me. That's just a really nice move and an even better backhand. I mean, again, there's really nothing you can do about that. And I'm glad that you brought up Achari because he really was fantastic in that game. Shot blocking menace. He was using his physicalness to really throw some nice hits. Was he probably offside on that Crosby goal? Yes. I saw the replay, but you know what? I'll take that call. What I said on Twitter was, if you need that long to make a call, just have the goal stand. That's what happened. But I understand at least why Islanders fans were a bit upset because it did look like he was legitimately offside there.
It's also common sense. I mean, yeah, like letter of the law, quite literal interpretation, he's offsides, but
right.
He's not affecting the play. He's going to the bench. He had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Like, is by letter of the law that offsides? Yeah. But at the same time, he's not affecting the play in any way, shape, or form. So whatever.
Few more positives to go over before we get to Warrior Helmet Wednesday. Sidney Crosby, another great game, gets another goal. Great backhand, still has the best backhand in hockey. Evgeny Malkin gets the Geno bomb. He was fantastic yet again. And shout out to Michael Bunting. He finally gets on the score sheet. Really nice shot past Ilya Sorokin. But you know what, Pat? An even better pass from Jesse Puljujarvi. The way that he knew Bunting was right there, the vision that he had to get that pass off. Awesome stuff. And I'll keep saying it on the show. He is one of your 12 best forwards. I don't care how many forwards you have. He has to be in the lineup on a nightly basis. You saw why with that play. Great play from him once again.
Oh, it was beautiful. I don't have a whole heck of a lot more to add on that. It was a very slick pass. And like you said, that's the kind of play you want to see from him. And he's been consistently making them for most of the season. So at this point, with the way this season has gone so far, what is the harm of keeping him in the lineup?
Yep, I agree on that. And I think with that, we're going to end the second segment of today's episode. And coming up in the final segment, you all know it. It's Wednesday. That means Pat and I are going to give out our Warrior helmet for this past week. And I think everyone that's tuning in knows who we're probably going to give our helmet to, considering the level that he's played at this past week. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our last sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, we're back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, I think we know who we're giving our helmet to. For me, it's Sidney Crosby and really no one else. I mean, the level that he's played at this past week has been nothing short of superb. He has 5 goals in his last 3 games. He was great against the Ducks, was the biggest reason why they won that game. He was great against the Canadiens, one of the biggest reasons why they won that game. And against the Islanders, he showed everyone once again that he has still the best backhand in the NHL, and he was all over the ice once again. He has tormented the Islanders and their fans throughout his career, and even though the Penguins lost that game, that was still very much the case in that one against the Islanders. But Sid is all the way back. Yes, he had a slow start. Yes, it was a bit unfortunate and maybe a little bit annoying, but again, sometimes it takes him a little bit longer to get out of a rut, considering that he is, 37 right now. But it's Crosby for me. Pat, I think I can say the same for you.
You can. I mean, this has just been a tremendous week for Sidney Crosby. He has really gotten himself back to the level we're so used to seeing with him. He's up to 15 points in 14 games, so the point per game streak is looking okay right now, so we might be able to see that history at the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, overall, you really can't give it to anybody else. One other person I could maybe make a case for, but again, it's so unanimously that it's going to be Sidney Crosby. I could give it to Ned. I think he's had a good few games here. I thought he was very solid last night. I can't really pin any of the goals on him. They were either good moves or bad bounces, and then shootouts are a coin flip crapshoot, so I'm not going to hold anything against him for that. So I mean, overall, it's got to be Sid, but I also did like Alex Nedeljkovic's game this week. I thought he was very steady. He did what he needed to do, a couple or three really good games, backstopping the Penguins. But like we said, end of the day, no mystery here. It's Sidney Crosby.
Absolutely. And if you wanted to make another case for a player outside of Nedeljkovic, and I would agree, I would have him up there too. But also, Erik Karlsson, I feel like had a really nice last week for the Penguins. He's been really solid in all three zones. He's been great offensively. I'm starting to really like him even more on the half wall and the power play. He's really starting to fit in there a bit more, but he's also playing a bit better defensively in his own zone too. Again, he was never going to win it this week, but if Crosby didn't have the week that he just had, I felt like he definitely would have been at least more in consideration, but I still probably would have given it to Nedeljkovic with the way he's played. But I felt like Karlsson still had a really nice last week for the Penguins as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's easy to kind of despair a little bit after last night's game. I get it. The trends are still there, but we have seen some positive signs over the past week that this team might be able to figure some things out. And a lot of it is on the backs of their most influential players. So while there is still a lot of frustration, this team has a long way to go. I am seeing some signs overall that this team might be able to figure it out. But until they do, I'm still skeptical. But at the end of the day, when you're getting the performances that you're getting from the players you need to perform, that at the very least can give you some momentum going into what's going to be one hard week here.
Right. I mean, I think for me, I like what I'm seeing offensively. The depth scoring has been great this year. The power play has been better. The penalty kill is really good. Nedeljkovic is giving them really good goaltending for the last week and change. But until this team learns how to defend a lead in the third period, I'm going to continue to remain skeptical that they turn it around this season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's definitely going to be. I'm skeptical until I see more consistent performances, but I'm seeing some underlying trends that give me a ever so slight glimpse of hope.
Yeah, I mean, again, until the players start executing in those situations and that coaching staff starts changing some things up to help the players in the situations, I'm going to continue to remain a bit skeptical that they can climb out of this hole. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this episode and put up with my raspy voice as hosting this show. But Pat and I will be back with another episode for you all on Thursday to get you all set for Penguins Hurricanes and how hot Carolina has been recently. I mean, they're playing very good hockey. We'll get you all set for that game Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon. And then Friday, we'll recap that game for you guys and get you all set for Penguins Capitals as well. So for Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll be back on Thursday.